Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch and as well as the morning sessions. This is really exciting. And thank you so much, Governor, for coming here, and thank you, JB, for doing this. I'm going to actually break protocol for a moment and ask JB a quick question, because I want to set up the panel. JB, just tell us what Redwood does, and then just a little bit about the global supply chain for the batteries and how far these materials travel, and then we'll hit South Carolina and why South Carolina.
Well, Redwood is basically a critical minerals refining, recovery, and remanufacturing company. In a nutshell, we take in old batteries, scrap materials, we recover all the critical minerals that are inside of those things, make them back into components the battery industry can use again, cathode materials, copper foils, things like this. The current supply chain for battery components is really fragmented. We've heard that, I think, in a few previous talks, but the US currently does not have an end-to-end supply chain, for all these components. We have almost no supply of cathode material. We have almost no supply, actually zero supply of copper foil that can go into batteries. So, we're working quite hard to try and, strategically fill some of those gaps in manufacturing to be able to have a full supply chain to make a lithium-ion battery in the US from components that also were made in the US.
And broadly, how far does, I've seen something of one of your slides, it goes like 50,000 miles to get different, if you look at all the materials. Do you have a sense of that travel?
It is a pretty amazing journey if you actually follow those atoms. I mean, something that might get mined in Australia, moved to China to be refined, sent back perhaps to Europe or other parts of Asia, maybe to be made into a cathode material, then sent to the US to be made into a battery, then sent to another factory, made into a car. It's incredibly tortured supply chain that's very hard to manage, very expensive to manage.
I wonder how many emissions go into that whole journey. So if one good reason to localize. So let's move to South Carolina. You guys are a little bit of an odd couple. Governor, you're like the first politician, I think, to endorse President Trump. And JB, you're like one of the first employees of Tesla that made this electric car revolution. How did you meet and get together, and maybe share a little of that story, Governor?
Why is that an odd couple? Doesn't sound odd to me.
I mean,
y'all know we can't see a single one of y'all. Oh, we have an audience.
It's a full room.
It's a full room. Well, South Carolina is, we positioned ourselves for this. We're a right-to-work state. We've got the best technical college system in the whole country. When Wilbur Ross, Secretary of Commerce under President Trump, used to come to South Carolina, every time he came, making speeches and presentations in different places, he spoke of our technical college system, which is fantastic. And that's one thing that makes a lot of difference to manufacturers when they come, because that's what it's set up for. And some of the courses and things that are provided are off the scale. I'll give you a couple of them. We have business calculus, introduction to anthropology. This is in technical college. We have 16. We started them in about 1959. Statistical methods, differential and integral calculus, solar system astronomy, general biology, general chemistry, general physics, as well as aircraft assembly technology, electronics, engineering technology, all of those sorts of things. And they're available free of charge. We put millions of dollars in scholarships so that in any high-demand job, if JB Straubel needs something and he doesn't have it, we can set up a curriculum in one of the technical colleges to provide it, and it won't cost anything. And we also we send a team to other countries or other places in this country to, when someone is interested in coming to South Carolina, and see what their processes are, and if necessary, we'll set up a curriculum at one of our technical colleges to provide that kind of training. And we've now developed a bachelor's degree in advanced manufacturing. That's a 4-year degree that allows people to move up in the organization. But all those things, we saw the electric vehicle thing, we saw that coming because everybody saw it coming. So in October of 22, we had a meeting. In fact, JB was there. He was one of the speakers. Is at the National Governors Association. People from all over the place, up in Greenville, South Carolina, and we put together the group, a working group that included the Department of Transportation, Commerce, Department of Employment and Workforce, Department of Motor Vehicles, Department of Health, Environmental Control, everyone in the government that had any connection with opening doors for electric vehicles is on that group. And so we set that up, and just coincidentally, shortly after that, JB Straubel announced that Redwood was coming to South Carolina, and they are moving very quickly as we can help them move, and they can move to get started. But those are the things we saw it coming, and we're not trying to force the market, but we want to be ready for the market. So in our the way we deal with manufacturers, particularly in manufacturing, automobile manufacturing, I think is about $27 billion in South Carolina, which is not as big as some states, bigger than others. I think we are 23rd in population in the country and about 40th in size, 5.3 million people. But we can turn on a dime, and we all work together. We communicate, collaborate, and cooperate. So that is how we got ready for this, and that's how we're going to stay ready for this and other things. We realize we have to have a lot of electric power. That's one thing that's going to be very important, and we're working on that as well.
Well, we're going to get back to the electric power bit. Well, maybe I'll let JB talk about why you ultimately chose South Carolina, besides an incredible governor who will move on a dime to do what you need.
Well, it's been a part of a long search that we've undergone and looked at a lot of different attributes of different sites and different states. South Carolina, if you look on a map of where all of these new battery factories are being announced, where new EV factories are being announced, South Carolina is right in the middle of all of it. And it's incredibly well positioned, essentially, to have a sort of major part of the ecosystem evolving in the US. And we looked at that proximity to those customers, both for incoming material and outgoing products. We looked at the labor environment, the energy mix, the attractiveness of the region for recruiting. This is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but we need to train a new workforce, as you pointed out. We need to attract talent into this industry. So being in regions where it's a little easier to do that is helpful, makes it go faster. And maybe just one other point about why this isn't an odd couple. You mentioned, this is an odd mix. In the beginning of Tesla, I was just reflecting and chatting with one of the other co-founders of Tesla this week, actually, and he reminded me that when we first started out, the majority of our customers were focused on energy security. That is what EVs were about in the beginning. And that's been largely changed and diluted, I would say, over the years. It's kind of become more politicized. But EVs initially were about using localized energy. We could use our own self-generated electricity from all the local energy resources that we have, whatever mix is in that state of question. But it wasn't imported. It almost couldn't be imported because you can't import electricity over an ocean.
Yeah, I mean, SAFE in 2005 when we started, we got together with General P.X. Kelly, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Fred Smith of FedEx, and we basically said we should produce what we can domestically, use as efficiently as possible, and go to electric vehicles because you have diverse domestic fuel sources that are stably priced going into the car. And we've seen this politicization of this issue. And I guess, Governor, let me ask you. How do we keep it out of the politics? You watch Fox News all the time. If I watch it, it's just like constantly pounding this. But again, I always say about the Chevy Volt, that GM, it was the greatest national security platform we ever invented in the United States and never deployed, or only a little bit. So I guess I'd ask you that. You said we want to be ready for the electric vehicles, but how do we take a little maybe out of the sting out of the way they're sold?
Well, I think a part of it is a lack of understanding, and that is some folks are so tired of hearing about climate change and things like that some people understand very well and others don't. When it gets mixed up in something that might be unpopular, then that's a strike against you. But the main obstacle, I think, is the availability of power and the availability of the charging stations and all those, and that kind of thing will follow the market. But as long as there aren't mandates, the main thing I think that a lot of the people that have studied it a little bit more are concerned about is mandates, because mandates don't work. We saw that in the pandemic. Mandates destroy things, and if you read the Constitution, you will see, as many of the courts saw that address those questions, and we brought some of those cases about requiring a business that has over X number of people to force their employees to get a vaccination. Well, that is not allowed under the Constitution, and the court said so. So as long as we stay away from mandates, I think we're in good shape. But that I think those are the areas that cause some of the criticism.
Yeah, we did some polling, and basically, if you create a ban, forget mandates for a moment, a ban, it's like basically the conversation ends.
That's right.
There's no way to even talk about it. So I see Redwood as a national security company, and South Carolina will be the largest above ground mine in the United States.
That's a good way to put it. That's right.
And so I don't know, maybe reflect on that, and for you, JB, let me ask you, like, maybe it's called black mass, what you're creating, recyclable material. Should we keep it in the country? We don't want to ship that back to China. Do we think about North America? Once you get this material, is it NATO? So I don't know. First of all, why don't you maybe reflect on this? Assume be the governor of the largest above ground mine in America.
Well, I think you hit on it with national security. Of course, it'll be an economic driver as well. It requires brain power, and we're going to produce plenty of that. Our research universities are working. We have a deal with the Savannah River National Lab, which is one of the 17 national laboratories, where University of South Carolina, Clemson University, and South Carolina State, all in South Carolina, and Georgia and Georgia Tech are providing the brain power for that national lab, and that's going to create all sorts of unleash a lot of talent that'll be available for everything innovative that's going on. But it is a national security question, as we saw during the pandemic. Of course, you can't get certain things fall apart. Now, our state, South Carolina, has 8 major military bases, and we've been fighting ever since our existence, from the Revolutionary War all the way through. And we have a great sense of understanding of the country's place in the world, and having critical components blocked from getting here can ruin us, as can a lot of this cyber stuff. There are a lot of things that are very dangerous that we didn't have before, that somebody can do in another place. I read where someone cut some of the cables in the Red Sea, was it? I mean, those kind of things. We are vulnerable. And one thing that we cannot be vulnerable on and survive is electricity and everything involved in it, storage, transmission, all of that. And this is something that something could happen tomorrow that would demonstrate how dangerous the world is. So that's how we see it. That's one aspect of it. Now, military tradition keeps us alert.
That's great. JB, do you have any thoughts on what to do with black mass and what types of policies we should have?
Well, I mean, black mass is sort of one intermediate, one component along that journey, all the way from kind of an old battery to a new. But maybe if we zoom out just for a second, I mean, EVs, I think are an energy security product because of the diverse energy use that they can provide. We touched on that, but they're only as secure as our ability to make them. And now we're sort of in the next phase of this problem, which is we don't have secured supply chain to be able to make electric vehicles or grid energy storage, for that matter. So, the really interesting difference, though, about batteries and the ones in EVs or on the grid is that the components are reusable. Very different than the sort of the hydrocarbon type of energy ecosystem and the materials involved. It's obvious when you think about it, but the ramifications are totally different. The U.S. is, I think, the biggest single national consumer of all these critical elements, nickel, cobalt, and maybe lithium as well. But we're not consuming them. We're basically building a strategic stockpile of them, because every bit of nickel that we buy in and import into the country, it doesn't go away. It's still sitting in a battery in a car somewhere. So we need the technology and we need the industrial base to refine those things, but we're already in the process of basically consuming them, bringing them in, building a strategic stockpile. We need to figure out how we access it and how we build the proper facilities to utilize it.
Hey, Governor, I'm going to recruit you for a mission. Basically, I think if we turn this into recycling and circularity and make it into an environmental issue, half the population might not listen. So we need you as the governor of Redwood in your state to lead the charge from the national security perspective that this is actually the foremost national security issue to keep our products in the country and our minerals. So maybe you can help me with that over the next year.
I would just send JB around and let him give that answer.
Yeah, but you have the better accent.
Thank you very much.
They won't believe us, they'll believe you. Let me ask you this question about electricity. You said that we needed electricity, and I know as a big manufacturing state, it gets harder and harder to build. Tomorrow we have a panel with aluminum producers, right? To crush, to smelt, to process. It's basically electricity. So, Governor, what are you trying to do in your state to make sure that there's enough electricity to bring these manufacturers?
Well, that is the one thing, that's probably the main thing that could hold us and everybody else back, is not having enough, because we do more and more with electricity. Everything we do, just look around the room, everything we do involves heating the coffee over there, these lights, everything. And it's a dangerous world, and we have to be ready to fight at any time. So what we're doing is we've realized the precarious nature of the situation, and so we began working on it. That's one reason we put together the EV Summit. We've had other efforts like that, but one is we created something called Power SC, where we again use the collaborate, communicate, and cooperate model and put together all the agencies, including the research universities that had a part in creating, distributing, innovating power. And just coincidentally, here the federal government announced a program called Technology and Innovation Hubs. And there will be millions of dollars to go into studying all of those things. But they only go pick 12 sites in the country. So all the states were asked to apply. So we did, and there were I can't remember, it was 400 or 700 applications. Some states sent in 2 or 3 were health care, all various types of things. We put all our eggs in one basket and said power, how to make it, all the sources. And in South Carolina, we're the 3rd state in the production of nuclear power. We're very much in favor of nuclear power and gas, and we have an all of the above approach. We don't have much biomass, but we have some hydro, have a good bit of solar. But anyway, so we submitted our application for power, and we were selected as one of the 31, and we're confident that we will be selected as one of the 12. And those funds and that focus is going to open up a lot of doors for a lot of talent, a lot of interest, and a lot of progress. And having companies like Redwood in the state just is like the cherry on the top of the cake, because people can look and see how innovative and forward-thinking that is, and that will bring even more talent to the question.
And how are you going to get the power that you need to do all these really energy intensive? I think I read that you're not going to attach yourselves to the natural gas grid.
Yeah, it's a big part of the selection process and thinking of how do we de-risk these factories. So we have a large campus in northern Nevada. That's our existing site as we expand into South Carolina. And in northern Nevada, for instance, part of why we initially went there was the flexibility and the capacity on the grid. We're in a location that has a lot of ability to expand and has a lot of projects that can ramp up and new ones that can deploy. We're also, in our side, looking at on-site solar as one of our cheapest opportunities. Just from a basic dollars and cents point of view, it's literally cheaper for us. So we're deploying a fair bit of that as much as we can. It's a relatively small percent on site, but still it's lower cost. And we're at least in Nevada, busy looking at partnering with a number of different other companies, who are developing new projects. Some geothermal, that's a great opportunity out on that side of the country for 24/7 baseload, very secure power, as well as utility scale solar. So and on the west, I'm kind of a fan of that mix. I think it provides a really interesting 24/7 low-cost solution. On the east, the nuclear capacity in South Carolina already was part of what we looked at. It's very, very stable. Also offers a low carbon mix, and I think we need to think of how we continue to expand that, though, and streamlining the permitting of transmission, of permitting of new projects, new plants. That's a little out of our wheelhouse, but I would be a strong supporter of that for the U.S. generally. I think it's sorely needed.
JB, when they talk about renewable energy, you truly are renewable. You don't just use the solar panels. You can then crush them, reuse them, and build a new solar panel. It's like totally renewable.
And what he said is precisely what we're doing. We're working with the legislative leaders to develop a 10-year plan based on these various questions right now. So we'll have a blueprint for the future, which, of course, as we turn on a dime, is subject to change as necessity and opportunity provide.
You started by talking about skills. Right now we're going from the Bible Belt. They say we're turning it into the battery belt. I just think that's holy power. And I'm just curious if you feel that the skill sets are there, and you talked about how you're creating them, and then of course, JB, are you finding the people capable wanting these types of jobs?
Well, it's always about the people. All the businesses that have come in since I've been in office since 2017, when we talk about their investment in South Carolina, a lot are interested in the tax structure and the infrastructure, the roads, the highways. We're putting more concrete down for highways right now than you've ever seen, and we really are expanding. But it always ends up with the people. Can you depend on the people? Do they have the talent? And that's why we emphasize in education so much. We're starting young. We've expanded 4-year kindergarten across the state at no cost. We're putting tons of money into the technical college system, which I mentioned is great. We believe firmly in school choice. Whoever wants a certain kind of education for their child, no one size never fits all, so we're allowing that. We're doing all of those things, but it's always the people. And so I've tried to delve into that a little, and I go back into our history, which I mentioned a moment ago. And it's produced some remarkable people. And we believe if you can show the young people, explain it to them, they've got to be educated. If you can show them how exciting all of this is, you'll have people running all over each other to get to this new arena, these new jobs. But always it's a character, it's a culture. And I remember 25 years ago when BMW 29 years ago, BMW first came to South Carolina, where, by the way, they're producing a new BMW up in Spartanburg, or Greer, just up in the northern part of the state, every minute in about 6 seconds, a new one. And, of course, Scout is the most recent.
Aren't they the largest exporter of cars from the United States
That's right.
from South Carolina?
Yeah, that's their biggest plant in the world. But the agreement for BMW way back to come to South Carolina was Governor Carroll Campbell and the boss or chairman of BMW had given up on all the big meetings, and they were adjourned the next day to the pool house, and the governor and the chairman and two other folks were sitting with them, and they thought up the agreement and scribbled it out on a cocktail napkin and shook hands, and that was it. And a few years ago at BMW's 25th anniversary, the chairman of BMW then made a speech to the group, and he said, South Carolina's a handshake state. When someone gives you, he said, I'd rather have your hand in mine and your word than a signed contract. Now that means something to people, and that's how we've talked to JB, that's how we talk to everybody. But it's things like that that make a difference. But of course they have to be educated, you have to have the spirit, you have to have that will, and again, that our Judeo-Christian traditions and our military traditions, when you put those traditions together with people that have come over the years from all over the place and subject them over the years, over the centuries to wars and hurricanes and everything else, you end up with some strong people. So I think that is the secret ingredient that we have in South Carolina, besides a lot of sunshine, beaches, and everything else. You want to go fishing, hunting, dancing, whatever you want to do, we got plenty of it, so come on.
I could never be a governor. I couldn't love a place as much as governors love their place. So that's awesome. JB, I don't know, are you getting the skills that you need? Or are you concerned about that in America?
Well, as the governor said, the people in South Carolina have been phenomenal to work with, and it's part of why we're there. But broadly, the U.S. has not been building batteries, assembling batteries for very long. This is all a relatively new thing, much different than our vehicle manufacturing base. I was part of the first gigafactory and leading that at Tesla in those days when we built that first battery factory here in the U.S. And there were literally no skilled jobs on how to assemble batteries. We had to train it all from scratch. There's a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of hunger for that type of work and being in that industry, but we were retraining casino workers and distribution center forklift drivers and teaching them how to come and make electrodes and assemble batteries. That's accelerating now, but we need to keep it going. And I think the training, the job-specific training for all things related to EVs, batteries, cathode materials, refining, that whole new industry is incredibly critical. And we don't have enough of it by any stretch in the U.S. It is a limiter.
Governor, you say that you want to preserve South Carolina for future generations, and that intersects with your pro-business ethos. Right. Give us a sense of that.
Well, we have a lot of history, as I mentioned, back in the Revolutionary War. I think if people understand what it took to get this country here, they have a much deeper appreciation for what they have right here in front of them. I watched the other night. Peggy was watching something on Fox, I think, and so I went in another room and turned on the movie, and there was The Patriot.
Well, at least you didn't turn on MSNBC.
No,
that would have been a problem. The Patriot, sorry.
Patriot. So y'all probably know that was roughly based on Francis Marion. Everybody know that? Well, we had three generals in the Revolution: Francis Marion, General Pickens, and Thomas Sumter, and they were all militia, and they did not coordinate directly, but they ended up working very much together. And by the way, we're trying to preserve as much of our land and waters as we can for the future. South Carolina has about 20 million acres. About 3 million are preserved with either conservation easements or parks, and we're getting more. I think we have about 16 million or something like that, or forests. If you can't find peace and happiness in the pine forests of South Carolina or sitting under a live oak tree. You probably have to wait till you get to heaven to find it, because it's quite something. But we're trying to preserve all those things. By the way, we think we found the place. We're trying to, we know the area in which Francis Marion had his camp in the Revolutionary War. He's the Swamp Fox. That was Mel Gibson's character in that movie. But the British couldn't find his actual camp, and we can't either, but we think we know roughly where it is, and we're going to preserve that. But if you preserve those old traditions, from the women making the straw baskets on the street in Charleston to the Gullah Geechee heritage, to the land, the water, all of that, then that is the thing. People decide to go to a place for a lot of reasons, with taxes and infrastructure and a business-friendly legislature. South Carolina, our business is business. You have your economic growth, your educational excellence, and your environmental and cultural protected. Those things, forests, statues, traditions, those are the things that hold us all together and provide a permanence into which something innovative like Redwood or Scout Motors or any of the others coming along can play on that field and prosper. So we think that's very important.
To slightly shift gears, maybe talk about the Inflation Reduction Act for a moment, JB. Was it what was needed? Where did they make mistakes, and how can they fix it?
Well, I mean, my view is the IRA, has been incredibly impactful. I think that's obvious today. It's driven hundreds of billions of dollars of new battery assembly factories to the U.S. shores. It's sort of without precedent. Everyone I talk to around the whole world is still kind of working to even react to that and figure out how to now, in their own countries, trying to figure out what that means for them. So from that point of view, it's been incredibly impactful. Where I feel like there still is a lot of work to be done is closing all the gaps in the component supply chain for those factories. There's still a lack of understanding, I think, across the whole industry that a battery assembly factory doesn't have everything it needs to make that battery. It is assembly in the end of the day. It's important, but it's assembly. Just like having a computer assembly factory, you can't bring a dump truck load of sand to a computer assembly factory and expect, to get out computer chips in a computer. It's the same way with a battery factory. You can't bring a dump truck load of lithium into that factory. You need a whole nother industrial ecosystem to make the lithium into a cathode material, to refine it, to make it into that functional component. The same with the nickel, the same with cobalt and copper. So that's where there is still a lot of work to do. And I don't see that industry coming to the U.S. very much yet. Redwood, we're working hard to build it, but we're one company and going as fast as we can. We're still a relatively small chunk of the percent supply chain. The rest of it is all imported. So I think we need to keep a critical eye on that, because that is a vulnerability in the end.
And do you think if you had to take a few extra years to get this supply chain running, and maybe slow down the electrification revolution, would you think that's worth it for national security?
I hesitate always to slow down that transition. I think if I could, I would say we balance the focus and try and just really understand it more deeply, so that we don't sort of rush all into one direction and maybe over-prioritize one part of that whole ecosystem versus another, whether it's incentivizing vehicle purchases or battery manufacturing or mining. I think we need to take a very thoughtful and coherent industrial strategy approach to this. And China has been doing this for many, many years. They've had a very, very consistent and coherent industrial policy approach to batteries and the critical minerals that go into them, among other things, but those in particular. And you can see the output of it. It's been many years of consistent effort in that way. The U.S. has had very strong pushes in certain areas, but sometimes that strong push then backs up. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and it's not spread consistently across the whole supply chain.
It reminds me. I think when the Ukraine war started, they quoted. I think it was VW, and they said all the carriages for their electric vehicle, all the wiring was made in the Ukraine. They said nothing is critical for your supply chain until it's critical for your supply chain, and that's why you need to have this diversity for all the components everywhere. I guess, Governor, if you had to wave a magic wand. I guess you are the governor. You could wave somewhat of a magic wand.
Yeah, I could wave it. I don't know what would happen, but I could.
What would, to reindustrialize the country and to, bring more business to South Carolina, what would you like to see changed?
Big question. I think the basis of all progress is going to have to be education. And there needs to be plenty of it. It needs to be provided. That's why all the broadband expansion, all of those things are so important to get education out to the people, and it's better for health. There's some folks, if the car's out of gas or the tire's flat or the car won't start, and then the whole day or the whole week falls apart, and then one little thing leads to others. But education, if we can. There is an American spirit. Sometimes it seems to go to sleep, but other times it's wide awake and ready to go. But if we can just educate our people, and I know the governors I talk to and other business leaders, everybody, mamas and daddies and everybody, they want to educate their children. But we can't ever overlook that. And you have to start at the bottom. If we want the children to go to the top, we got to start early and start at the bottom. Some folks don't have things available to them. Well, we got to do all we can to see that everybody has those kind of opportunities. But if we're not educated, then without education, civilization ceases. So, I think it was Will and Ariel Durant or somebody of that caliber said that the mark of an educated person is that he or she would be able to recreate our society, to know where the pieces fit together and how you get from here to there. And I think that's very true. So education.
And I'm going to ask the same question. I don't know what you would create with your magic wand, but what would you like to see changed either in any of their states or just the country as a whole?
Well, it's tough to know how to scale that. I'm an engineer at training, so I don't think we're talking about changing the laws of physics here. So if we limit the magic wand to maybe
politics, permitting,
politics,
electricity.
I wish we could have a very long-term consistent approach to some of these issues, which are fundamentally very bipartisan issues, but I've been in electrification for a long time, and I've seen them bounce back and forth probably 4 times now between different administrations, different incentives of people pushing for these things. And it hurts all the agendas to do that. And I really wish we could sort of back away from that a little bit and decide and see what matters to the country overall, to the benefit of the country, the benefit of the people, and be consistent on those things, because we'd make so much faster progress if we could have that consistency and that steady push over many years.
Well, JB, we welcome you to working with us to make that happen. And Governor, I welcome you to convince everyone that recycling is the greatest national security for the entire country. So thank you both for being here, and I look forward to working with you both.
Likewise. Thank you.